Rich Dad, Poor Dad was written in 1997, and it was written about me being 9 years old. And Unfair Advantage is saying the same thing in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but this time I'm in my 60s. And you're going to find there's been no change between Rich Dad, Poor Dad and Unfair Advantage, except the level of sophistication has gone up. I say the same things. So in many ways, Rich Dad, Poor Dad is elementary school, and Unfair Advantage is graduate school. For example, I start in 2010, and when most people were losing everything, I was making millions and millions of dollars simply because I have the unfair advantage of a financial education, something they'll never teach you in school. So for those of you who enjoyed Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I think you'll find Unfair Advantage. And some people say it's my best book ever because it's so up to date. It's about today's economy, what's going on. And the reason I write is for one main reason, is you and I know there's a financial crisis on. The problem is most people don't know what to do about it. So they do the same old thing they were taught. Some people are going back to school to get another college degree or new skills. They try and work harder. They'll try and save money. They'll live below their means. They'll try and buy a house, and they'll have a 401k full of mutual funds. All of those things are possibly the worst things you could do from a tax perspective. Saving money is taxed at the same rate your income is taxed at, and so is a 401k. Why would you do that? But since most people don't know, they just do what they're told, call a financial planner, and try and save money and put the money into a 401k full of mutual funds. And they never get ahead that way. And then if they work harder, they just move into a higher tax bracket and are taxed more. And that's why my concern is the middle class is being cleaned out in this crisis because they're doing the same old things they were taught when they were kids.
Now, do you the other problem with people entrusting other people, I'm not going to use the name Madoff, although I just did, entrusting other people with their money is that nobody loves your money as you do, and it's not a crime to love money. You got to love it because you need it to survive, and that's something you talked about in your kind of like your promo for the new book, is that money should not be a dirty thing. It's something that we need whether we like it or not. Every marriage is in one way or another has a big issue about money, whether it's too much or too little, or how to make it, how to make the next check. There's arguments about it. It is what it is. People need to understand that when you bring the responsibility into your own hands, you understand the money, you understand how to make it work, and then you can pass it up to the next generation.
Well said. Well said. What we're taught to do is work for the rich and then turn our money over to the rich so they can manage it for us.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to work. It seems like a big circle jerk when you really break it down.
No, I mean, and the mutual funds, they're not as bad as Madoff, but they're pretty close.
Now, I know you're not a big fan of politics or the game that it's become, really. However, there are people that blame the government for all the ills in the nation and the crisis that we're in right now, as you mentioned before. And there's others that blame business, big business, small business, business in general, capitalism, and money for leading us into our current fiscal crisis. The truth is, however, that if either or both were no longer obstacles, people would not know how to proceed because of a severe lack of financial education. Anyway, how can we as a nation remedy this unattended crisis? Unattended to crisis, I apologize.
Well, I personally have no faith in my government. I mean, I love my country. I just don't trust our leaders. And when I came back from Vietnam in 1973, I distrusted my government even more. So just recently, they had, Ben Bernanke, the Fed chairman, speaking at his first press conference, and he was saying, "I will defend the strong dollar." And the more he said that, the more the price of gold and silver went up, which meant nobody believes him. So the markets are telling you something. And so then Bernanke comes on and says there's no inflation. Well, you look at the price of oil, gold, silver, food, medical, health care, and schools. How can you say there's no inflation? So if you're stupid enough to sit and listen to these politicians, I mean, you should go back, ask your school for a refund or something, because they're driving that dollar down so they can export more products. So they need a weak dollar. If there's no weak dollar, they can't get jobs into this country. So they're actually going to rip off and destroy the middle class to save the dollar. And these people, these intellectuals like Obama and these guys, are sitting there, go to school, but they didn't teach you anything about money. And that's why we have a problem. Is most of our senators are lawyers. They don't know anything about money. All they know how to do is manipulate the laws. And most of these school teachers, if they knew anything about money, they wouldn't be school teachers. So that's our problem. Is not so much the government, but ignorance. There's a massive financial ignorance. Now, the unfair advantage is this. If you know the real facts, and I don't just talk about it, I practice what I preach, you can take advantage of this whole situation. That's why it's called an unfair advantage. If you're a capitalist, you'll love unfair advantage. If you're a socialist, you'll hate the book.
Well, that's something, again, you talk about quite often, because people do need to realize there's so many people that are really politically involved, but they don't realize what either party is doing, because one borrows and spends, one tax and spends, and that's I believe that's straight out of increase your financial IQ, but it's straight out of common sense as well, because we don't have anybody that understands money, how to create a job, how jobs are lost, how jobs are brought back, if they can be brought back, and what makes the economy run, especially that it's so complex now. You can't have a brains trust of Harvard Ivy League eggheads controlling the economy, because, as we've seen, it hasn't worked throughout history. So what makes them think that, their piece of paper degree is any better than throughout history?
Most of them are like my poor dad, PhDs, which stands for poor, helpless, and desperate. And the only way they can make money is actually cheat the system. There's a book called Inside Job, which won an Academy Award this year. You should see that movie. It doesn't go in enough detail, but it's a good movie. But you'll see how Harvard and Columbia University professors were involved in the subprime crisis. They're not dishonest people. They're just not honest. They just don't know any better. So they're easy to fool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of those same people, they create the crisis that everybody else in the middle class has to endure and don't really know how to navigate through. So there's a constant fear. That's why when 2008 was going on and the economy was really melting down so quickly, it was made worse because people were so fearful. But I sat back and I was fearful as well, and I started looking at, when some of the stocks that I like, CSX, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, all these other stocks, Nissan. I looked at all these stocks, and within 6 months, a year and a half, they quadrupled. And the smart people sit back in an opportunity like that and let all the pigs lead themselves to the slaughter, or the sheep lead themselves to the slaughter, and they sit back and gobble everything up. That's the whole idea of navigating through a crisis. How do people, with the situation that we're in right now, because there's not one real problem that we can point to, whether it's housing or the dollar, gold, silver, obviously going through the roof and hitting new records, it seems like almost every day. How do people get through it now? How do people see now as an opportunity instead of, biting their fingernails and trying to script and save every dollar?
Well, if you're biting your fingernails and you're trying to scrimp and save and work harder and go back to school and invest in stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, then you bought the program. Most people are not investors. They're actually gamblers or speculators. And I don't do that. That's why it's called an unfair advantage. I made $87 million in 2010. It's not a lot of money. But I also got a tax refund of $2 million. And the reason is I don't have stocks, bonds, or mutual funds. I use bank money. I use pension fund money. But I am a professional investor, and I have a financial education. I think if you read Unfair Advantage, I don't expect people to do what I do, because it's fairly complex, and I've been doing it for 30-something years. But at least you'll give them some ideas, say, well, maybe I should do something different, like not go back to school to get a higher-paying job and pay more taxes. Maybe I shouldn't save money because the Fed is printing $3 trillion. Or maybe I shouldn't try and save money in a mutual fund because mutual funds are the biggest rip-offs going. And only until you start questioning what you're doing can a new idea come in. And if you don't question what you're doing, then you'll get the same results. And that's what's happening for most people who are sweating the economy, hoping Obama or the next president will save them and all this. Well, that's socialism. You'd expect the government to take care of you. That's socialism. That's communism. And I'm a capitalist. So unfair advantages for capitalists, and they'll love the book. Socialists will hate the book because they want everything to be equal.